Welcome back. A garage door is one of the largest portions of your home's exterior, but often we don't think about how to customize it to bring out our home's best look. So this paint makeover Sharon did recently is sure to inspire you. Take a look.
This is a great example of how paint and color can bring a contemporary touch and even some elegance to the most utilitarian areas at the front of your house, the garage door. Now, this garage area is owned by two families, and I was happy to work with both of them to create a new color palette. When I first saw the project, there had been some water damage to the fascia and some staining on the brick, and they were ready to replace the railing above, so it was a good time for a paint refresh that would really give a cohesive look to both homes. So for starters, I tried out some digital color renderings with Benjamin Moore's personal color viewer software, and this was a great way to start out. I tried matching the stain on both homes to something like Rockford Gray. It looked pretty good, but it was a little bit too light down here and felt a little out of context. So for the second rendition, I went a little darker. It was great, it felt a lot more grounded, but it still wasn't perfect. So I love using the digital tools for narrowing down the color options, but really when it comes down to it, I always try out some real color samples on boards. So the winner for the brick was Kendall Charcoal. It was dark enough that worked with both the natural stone on the one side and the natural timbers on the other side. So I used 2 coats of Aura exterior with a flat finish so it best replicated the texture of the brick. The garage doors needed a little bit more TLC, so after some scraping and sanding, we tinted the primer gray and then used just a classic black in a low luster. So there's just a little touch of sheen. Now, to prevent future water damage, a downspout had to be installed. It was very important, critical, but it wasn't the prettiest looking thing. So since there aren't a lot of color options with that, we decided to paint it with the same Kendall Charcoal just to camouflage it right in. Now, for some of the newer wood materials, like the railing, the wood fascia, and the utility boxes, we went with a solid stain instead of paint. Now, no matter how many different materials you have, the key to a cohesive look is always to use the right color palette. In this case, it was a really simple one of 2 colors, and just make sure that everything ties in with all of the natural surroundings.
Looks so good, and the weather is still so nice enough to take on an exterior paint project, or you can at least plan for next spring. But how do you choose a color palette? This question we get asked so often. So Sharon is with us right now with some pointers. Where do we start, Sharon?
Oh wow, absolutely, Trace. Where do you start is the hardest part, and I think people get so overwhelmed because we have thousands and thousands of colors. So let's kind of go through the first stage, which is the fun part, which you could start now, even if you're not working on a project till spring, is gathering your inspiration. So a lot of us like to do this online. You can go around your neighborhood, take photos of houses that are similar styles that you really like. However you want to do it, look through magazines, pull things, whatever. You just want to get an idea of the different colors and styles that are out there for your house so that you have an idea which direction you want to go. So that's the fun part. But then you want to think about, you need a starting point, right? And so when it's interior, we think about a rug or some artwork that we have to pull colors out. Well, it's the same idea with the outside. You've got to look at your home and look at the fixed elements and build your exterior color palette around that. So there's a lot of things that you aren't going to paint. Often your brick, your stone, certainly your roofing, and all of those things are going to come into play.
And those fixed parts, like the roof or the brick, they're all part of your color palette. Like, you have to count those as part of the palette, right?
In fact, I recommend usually 3 to 5 colors for the exterior, and you have to include those elements. So if you've already got 2 that are very different, you've got to work with those as your starting point. So it's really critical to count that. And in fact, one trick that I tend to recommend to people is to get some paint chips, whether it's the fan deck or you go to the store and get some chips and match them up to your brick or to your stone and to your roof, so that you're carrying these around when you're looking at colors, so that since you can't carry your brick around with you, so you've got some easy to manage references. So we've got those fixed elements. We started looking at other areas. then you got to define what you're actually going to paint. So what are the surfaces that you are going to paint? So in a lot of cases, typically it's the body of the house, like all the cladding, whether it's vinyl, stucco, or if you are painting brick, you want to think about that big area. Then you've got trim, like window trim, door trim, maybe you've got shutters. If you've got a larger house, you've probably got garage doors to contend with. And then you've got your front door. So it's important to think about all those areas that you are going to paint and think about the overall feel that you want.
And Sharon, what role does contrast play in trying to narrow down your color options?
Well, Trace, it is really important, and the contrast can either be from dark or light, or do you want the color of the overall body color to sort of harmonize with those fixed elements, or do you want there to be a contrast? So do you want like a really dark, cool color on the cladding to contrast with the warm fixed elements, or you want something that's going to blend in? So that's important, and that really helps you determine the body color overall.
Now, the next thing that we get asked all the time is about the garage door. So what is the rule? Does the garage door need to match the trim? Can it be all on its own? What do you think?
Well, that's a really good question, because the garage door, often people want to paint it the same color as the front door. There's nothing wrong with that, except then you're losing that focal point. So the front door is really that opportunity that you can have a bit more fun. Whereas the garage doors, I tend to either blend it into the trim. So if you've got a darker or a lighter trim color, you might want to blend it into the window and door trim so that it's just kind of quiet, or even go a little bit darker or lighter than the body of the house, so that it has if it has an interesting architectural element, then highlight it a little bit. But remember also that your trim doesn't always have to be white. So thinking about trim, it's important to think about all of the other fixed elements. And if you don't have anything white out there, and you've got, you know, a darker brick or a darker finish, you've got something like Chantilly lace, it's really, really stark. Consider going a little bit toned, like something like white down. And you want to make sure that you take a look at it outside, because you can really see those undertones. So again, you don't want to go with that default white all the time.
So if you're being a little bit conservative with the garage door, I guess the advice is have fun with the exterior door, isn't it?
Absolutely, Trace. I think that's such a wonderful opportunity for a pop of color. It's not a difficult thing to paint yourself, even if you want to do it seasonally. I've painted my door, I can't even tell you how many times, because it's just sort of a fun area. And again, that's where you can go contrast. If the rest of your house is feeling very warm, you might want to go with something cool, like a blue for that front door, or vice versa. If the house is more on the cool side, you want to go with a warm tone. And that's where you might want to get into, you know, sort of getting outside of the realm of the natural colors. You can kind of venture into some of the brighter tones. But overall, a tip that I love to tell people, and I find really, really helpful, is because there's thousands and thousands of colors, to help narrow down, I always recommend going to one of our curated palettes. The historical is definitely one of my favorites. So there's just under 200 colors to choose from, but they all work really, really well together, and they work well outside. So I would go to that route first, and then sample, sample, sample. Make sure that you're not just picking your outdoor colors with these tiny little paint chips, okay? You want to make sure that you get some color samples, paint it on boards. You can even go quite a bit bigger than this, but that way you can look at it outside and you can really see how it's going to jive with all of your elements and how it's going to look from morning to night.
Now, Sharon, such